bad.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Randes, also known as Ricky Randes, and a great episode for you today. Today, we get to talk about a topic that I don't get the opportunity to discuss a lot. We're going to talk about sports, parenting, football, or also known as soccer in the U.S., child development, and other related topics. You're going to enjoy this conversation with Dr. Chris Platts. Dr. Platts was a part of the biggest independent study examining youth athletes becoming pro. He's a coach, he's a consultant, he's a researcher, and he helped us better understand the truth about becoming a pro athlete and also the myths. So if you're a parent, if you're a coach, if you're just a fan of sports, you're going to enjoy this conversation. And if you do enjoy this conversation, also check out Project Footballer. He was a recent guest on that show. It's one of my favorite shows that also hits on these type of topics. But before we jump into this amazing conversation, a couple updates. As some of you guys might know, my YouTube channel, my original YouTube channel that got banned in 2021 has been reinstated for some weird reason. They recently gave me the opportunity to appeal the banning of my original YouTube channel, and I appealed it, and I have it back. So I think somebody at YouTube is a fan of the Ripple Effect Podcast because I don't understand why all the past episodes are still there. I'm uploading all the archives, and we're just about up to date. So all the most recent episodes are now also available on my YouTube channel. So you'll find two Ripple Effect Podcast YouTube channels exist. One is a clips channel, and now you can find the full archives and full-length episodes of the Ripple Effect Podcast on YouTube. I don't know how long that's going to last, so please subscribe to us on Rumble, on BitChute, on Substack, on Podcast Addict, Spotify, iTunes, whatever you use to listen or watch to the Ripple Effect Podcast. Please subscribe to us, and you can find all these links and much more on the rippleeffectpodcast.com. Also, remember that this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these discussions that I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. You can subscribe to us on all those video and audio platforms. You can also rate, review, comment, or leave a thumbs up on those audio and video platforms. But if you are in a good financial situation, please consider financially supporting the show. We have an amazing merch store with some awesome new logos and designs. We also have mugs, hats, hoodies, t-shirts, stickers, and much more. So check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com to go directly to the merch store. Or like always, you can find all these links and much more on my website, the rippleeffectpodcast.com, or in the show description. You can also send a one-time donation via Venmo or PayPal, or you can support us monthly via Patreon, and Patreon's a great way of supporting the show. If a small percentage of people who listen and watch the Ripple Effect Podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. So $1 a month is not going to do a lot in regards to changing your life, but it can easily change mine if enough of you guys contributed as little as $1. And then, of course, we have a couple sponsors, one being Content Safe. Content Safe is how I get all my videos on all the platforms I'm on. So Matt from Content Safe has been uploading and syncing all my archives to my YouTube channel that just got reinstated. He also syncs all my channels from band.video to BitChute to Rockfin to Rumble. All I have to do is upload to one location, and magically within an hour or two, that video is available everywhere. If that's a service that you're interested in, he also runs my website, by the way. But if that's a service that you're interested in, please contact Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're listening to Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll definitely hook you up. The last sponsor is Opus Clips. It's an amazing tool. It uses AI technology to take a long formatted podcast or conversation or video and then give you tons of viral clips. It's super easy to use. You can add B-roll. It uses AI to rate the clips so you know which clips are more likely to go viral. It uses AI to create B-roll. So you just type in whatever type of image or video you're looking for, and it will create one for you. It lets you do video editing. It lets you do tons of different stuff, add music, and much more. So please check out Opus Clips. Use the link in the show description or on my website, and you can support the Ripple Effect podcast and start making viral clips today. That's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Dr. Chris Platts, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.
So to start where I am now, my name's Dr. Chris Platts. I'm a career coach working in professional football. So I did a PhD, which examined the lives of 303 young players who were 16 to 18, and I'm also the author of the largest independent study into career trajectories. Now, what I do with that work is I disseminate it to young players, to their families, with the aim of doing three things so that they can predict the future, they can plan for their careers, and they can then reduce the negative stresses that impact on performance and their wider lives. And the overall aim of what I do is to get everybody involved in football enjoying it, knowing that whatever the journey is going to hold for them, however long it lasts for, they can thrive within the game, they can thrive outside the game. That's what I'm aiming to do. I came to football from being born in Sheffield in the north of England, two professional football teams. I followed Sheffield Wednesday, who, when I started supporting them, actually just beat Manchester United in a cup final. And since that point, it's been a steady sort of decline. There's not been, so they were relegated from the Premier League. Of course, in England, we've got relegation from the Premier League in 2000, and they've not been back since. So that's been a long time in the divisions below. But where I really came to, although I had a passion for football, I am a coach. I'm actually a field hockey coach. And through my degree, I did a sport and exercise science degree, and I really started to engage with and enjoy sociology of sport. So that the interchange between sociological theory, how we understand society, and sport. So typically things like drug use in sport, football hooliganism, fighting at football, how we perhaps governments try to increase participation for wider social good, these sorts of scenarios. And it's something really new to me. And through that work, I came to a study, which was, we've got a big, complex scholarship system in the UK, in England and the UK, which essentially took kids out of school at the age of 16, full time, took them into a professional football club, and then they had 2 years as what they would call a scholar. So not a scholarship as we'd see in North America, but a different type of scholarship where they would be doing some education, but primarily they would be in a football club. There was a lot of policy around what should be done, but it was about 15 years since anybody had actually systematically explored how the young players who were in there, who were aged 16, 17, 18, how they experienced what was supposed to be going on. So what was their education like when they were in an academy? How were they treated by the professional players who were older than 18? How did they manage their 2 years? How did they manage their injuries? How did they find living away from home? All of these things had not really been explored. Nobody had researched, nobody had asked that in loads of detail, and certainly not from a sociological perspective. So that's how I came to this research. I spent 6 months going up, about 4 months actually, up and down the country. I drove around 3,000 something miles. I drove a long way around, and England's not big, so I drove around England, and I visited 21 professional clubs, and I interviewed 303 players. It gave me a really, really good understanding of their lives. It gave a great sample size, 303 players. In there were 5 clubs from the Premier League, 8 clubs who were in the Championship, the one below, 3 clubs in League One, the one below that, and 5 clubs in League Two. So excellent geographical spread across the country So no way. So now we're at a point of going, there's no way this group can systematically lie. We're getting good findings. And what what was uncovered in there was now what I use to educate young players and their families about their lives and what a scholarship will be like if at the age of 16 they decide to go into a professional football club. And that's what I built. Now, the second bit of the study is once I'd finished the PhD, that was 2012, and I had the names of 303 players because they'd all had to sign a consent form to say they were happy to take part. That's obviously confidential. Never tell anybody who was in the study. But because I'd got the names, I then was able to track them. And I thought, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to these 303 players. Who's going to get and play international football? Who's going to play in the Premier League? Who's going to... And over the course of the next 10 years, I then, with some help of colleagues I was working with at the time, tracked players, found where they were gone at the end of each season using databases online, where have they gone? And now, to add to my original study of this is what a scholarship's going to be like, there's then another bit, which is working with young players and parents saying, and this is what the next bit's going to be like. So now that's why one of the aims of the business is to help you predict the future, because we can plug you into the data and we can say, this is how this is really likely to play out for you. Not, and we don't just stick to one path. It's you're at a championship club. Here's the group in the sample who are in the championship club. And this is all the ways in which this turned out, from those who only got managed a year in the professional game and then never seen again. Some who managed to get up to the Premier League from the Championship, some who went abroad, some who had perhaps 6 or 7 years, but then dropped out the game altogether. So how do we then manage if your career is going to be, let's say, 6 years? We can go through it all. And the really exciting bit for me is once you start to address that, you start to address the stresses that young players have because of the uncertainty that people suggest we have in the game. If you're going to have a career in the game, or it's uncertain, you never know how long your contract's going to be. Well, I now say we can look at this, we can engage with this data, and you know what's going to happen. It's going to be one of these routes because we've got a huge sample, and this is what happened to them. So now we're at a point where I'm really passionate about getting that message out to players, to young players, to their families, their wider networks of their friends, their partners, and getting them to go, now I understand what's going to happen. And now I'm in a place where I can just be present when I go into training, or if I go on a loan move, or if I move to America and get a scholarship, I'm present because I know what's coming. We talked about it. We've got a playbook. Perfect. That's exactly how we want players to be.
And so, throughout this whole journey, what were some of the surprising things that maybe you learned, or maybe some things that you thought, or you looked at one way, and then after this research and doing all this investigation into these players, their own personal journeys, their what they've been through, what they're enjoying, not enjoying, all that stuff. Like, what
Yeah.
was the biggest surprises for you?
I would say the biggest surprise, and funnily enough, I was in a club just last week doing some sessions with parents and kids. And when I revealed this statistic, everybody got it wrong. Everybody got it wrong. So, in fact, let's do this now with you and listeners, right? If people are listening along, then we'll give a bit of a pause. So, we've got a group of scholars who get taken into a club at the age of 16. The first question I had was, how many got a professional contract at the age of 18? So how many young players get pros? And this question came from this book. See if I can get it on screen. Michael Calvin, No Hunger in Paradise. And he famously quoted 0.012% of players make it to the Premier League. Now, I wasn't looking at the Premier League, but Do you want to have a bit of a guess? Mind you, if you've listened to the podcast, you might also remember it. You've got a bit of an insight, haven't you? But um, yeah, I'll just pause here. So basically, the question is, how many players got from 303? There was a sample. What percentage of those got a professional contract at the age of 18? Can you remember from the podcast, or are you going to have a guess?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay, we'll go for it then. Let's have a.
I remember you having this conversation, and I remember you guys expanding on it. I can't remember what the percentage was. It's it was surprising though. I can't
It
remember,
was high.
right?
It was higher than I thought. So it was 56%.
So
And
56% of they got a pro contract, and pro, defining pro, that would be any Premier League specifically, or just any top tier pro team.
any pro team. So it could actually even be the National League because in England below we've got the top four tiers, which have been traditionally professional leagues. Actually, the fifth tier below that is now, I think, maybe even all professional. There might be a couple of clubs in there that are semi-professional. Um, but professional is defined as it's your only job, and you're making a living at a club that is regarded as a professional club. They pay their players. That was way higher than I thought because all I was expecting as a graph it to be up here are all the players, and then we get to the age of 18, and there's this big drop off, and it'd be about 20%. And I knew it wasn't 0.12%, but it was 56%. And straight away that was okay, that's requires more investigation. And that's a good thing about doing sort of research where the more you ask, the more questions you uncover, and then you ask again. So some of the things that then came from further research in that area is we now have a saying in the business, which is you're not really a professional until you get a second professional contract. And the reason that's the case is two reasons. Number one, um, a lot of clubs now have B teams or under 21s teams, and they are more like, particularly if they've got resource, they are more likely to perhaps give a 1 year professional contract, maybe a 2 year professional contract. It might be on okay wages, it might be £1,000 a week, it might be about £400 a week. But the clubs where they've got a bit of resource might have sort of expanded to think, you know what, we're making a decision at 18. That's quite early in a player's development. Let's give them an extra year and see if they mature, see if perhaps physically they develop a little bit. And what that does is that kind of masks or blurs the line between making it as a professional where we might regard you as having a career for a sustained period of time and getting a contract for a year, couple of years and almost you're still in a bit of a trial period. That's the first thing. And the second thing, which is probably the biggest impact from the podcast that you listen to, people getting in touch with me, is the facilitator player. So what occurs with a facilitator player is um, we sign somebody up, we sign John up, and John is then we think he could make our first team. So we get John, and we think he could either make our first team or we could sell him and to a big club, and we might be talking £30 million. Okay, so this is really good for the club. Now John can't play on his own, so now what we need players who we probably deep down know that they're not going to be good enough for our first team, and realistically, some we might be able to sell them for a little bit of money. The majority, no, nobody's going to pay money for them. They might take them at the end of their contract on a semi-professional basis, but we can't play with just John in the team. We need a goalkeeper, we need a right back and a left back. Who's going to play centre midfield alongside John? So clubs have to employ players to facilitate the development of John. And I've come across a number of examples at clubs where behind the scenes, the club staff talk quite openly about, no, no, he's not going to make it. He's not going to be here for that. But that discussion doesn't happen with the player. The player might get £1,000 a week and think, oh, that must not be bad. I'm getting £1,000 a week. It's 50 odd thousand pounds. I'm at 50, $60,000 a year. But they're not. They're not. And they are just there. And if you in the grand scheme of things, like say 60, 70, $80,000 for a season, for a club that's in the Premier League, that's fine. It's not a lot of money. And then those players come to the end of their contracts, say after 2 years, and the offers aren't there. And the offers for other clubs aren't there. Or the offers they are getting are really low down, and they're thinking, why aren't I getting any offers higher up? Because in their mind they've been thinking, I've just been paid by a Premier League club for 2 years. Surely people are looking at me thinking he must be all right. But inside the game, people will know that some of these are facilitator players. They'll have seen them play. The standard's not as good as perhaps the self-image is, or their own perceptions of where they're at. So all of a sudden, that 56%, which was higher among the Premier League clubs, it was 80%. 80% of players who were a scholar at a Premier League club got that first year pro, got something. Not necessarily at a Premier League club, but at some club. Some club came and took them. 80% of them, 8 out of 10. So that's quite high. But those two things matter. I think those two other pointers, the facilitator players and the let's take a chance and see if they develop, probably papered over the statistics. So that's when it became really interesting to say, well, now we've got that, we've got a measurement, we've got a line in the sand at the age of 18. What's going to happen when they're 26, 22, 24, 26, 28? How will they go? How will they go from there? So that was probably the most interesting part, or surprising. That was what you asked me, wasn't it? Surprising element of this.
Yeah, well, I guess this is a conversation I have with parents a lot too. Like you see it all the time where parents will their kid will be playing U8, U10, whatever it is, but very young, and they're already like, it's not like my kid's gonna make it, who cares? It's they seem like they're already throwing in the towel or not as invested in their kids pursuing a sport because they look at it as like this is just a hobby. He's not good enough. And it's just to me that's a huge issue because one I've talked to a lot of professional athletes, MMA, basketball. I just had John Stockton on, one of the greatest basketball players of all time.
Yeah,
And a lot of these players, and even on Project Footballer, one of my favorite episodes was with Richard Allen, and
yeah,
Richie talks about Harry Kane, and I'm a, I mean, you talked about your team struggling. I know your struggles. I'm a Spurs fan, so
yeah.
yeah,
Tough times.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
very, very tough times. I mean, hopefully we win Thursday in the Europa League. Give us something to be excited about.
yeah. That would be useful.
We're not going to obviously we're the Premier League just throw in the towel, like rest people. If you end up making a little bit of a run in the Europa League, we're not going to get
Yeah,
relegated. We're not that bad. So it's like as long as we can, we can at least make a little run, it'll be something to be excited about, and we
yeah,
can hopefully forget about the season. But with Harry Kane, I always tell the story, and Kane saw Tom Brady's story and they connected and became friends because they had very similar stories. They had all these people that told them that they couldn't make it, they'd never do it, they never whatever, and they just never gave up. And that's literally the story that the similarity you see with a lot of, not, I wouldn't say all, I mean there's some that are just, I mean LeBron James had celebrities at his high school game, so it's like not everybody goes through that
yeah,
longer road
yeah,
to the pros, but there's so many stories of people who you know were told over and over again you'd never make it. And there's this guy Derek White who plays for the Boston Celtics, and I'm a big Celtics fan. And so it was like a couple seasons ago, and the Celtics obviously won the championship last year,
yeah,
and this year they're on road to be another very competitive team in the playoffs. And so it was a couple years ago before they won the championship. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're playing, I believe, the Miami Heat, and they're
Yeah.
interviewing Derek White's father during like halftime or one of the commercial breaks or whatever. And they're like, "Hey, how do you feel about like your son being one series away from playing in the NBA Finals?" And his dad was blunt and very honest, and I loved it because I'm like, people need to hear this. He's like, I'm going to be honest with you. He's like, we never thought he'd do it. We never thought he'd make it. And he's like, he's been proving us wrong ever since. And I'm like, I love that because so many parents will just burst their kid's bubble. And it's like, again, when you look at like these stories of people who succeed, like they make it to maybe the championship, right? Maybe they end up playing on Sheffield Wednesday, right? And guess what? Like to them, they've succeeded to some extent. Like maybe they're not playing the Premier League, but they get to do something that they love and they get paid for it, and they're playing they're a pro athlete. Like to me, it's all a matter of like what do you want to gain from it, right? Because I think to
Yeah.
pursue a
Yeah.
sport, we can get into the conversation of the other uh, things that you will get out of sports, even if you don't reach the highest, the pinnacle of the sport. But if you pursue anything else, like, and I forget what statistic it is that they talk about how people who play high level sports, they succeed in just, statistically they succeed more often than not than the average person because of the discipline that's
Well,
learned, the
yeah.
team
Yeah.
skills, the
Yeah.
unselfishness, all this stuff. And then it's like, well, and then what's success, right? And then you go into the conversation of like, is success only if you make it to the Premier League, or is success like, hey, I want to be a professional footballer and I don't want to work a 9 to 5, and I just want to be involved. Maybe you end up being a coach, maybe you end up being
Yeah.
a mentor or so all these things are very interesting conversations.
One of the things that I encourage parents to do, and again, people are listening, and this goes for any sport, by the way. Um, the very first thing that I do is get people to write down what it is that they want from football, because this strange thing occurs when, and I think this developed a debate on the Project Footballer podcast of when a child, and I know you're involved in a football club, when a child turns up for the first time to your club when they're 7, 8, 9, if you say to them, "What? Why are you here, Harry? Nice to meet you, Harry. Great to have you along. Why have you come?" I will bet people that low down on the answer of that 6, 7, 8 year old will be, "I want to be a professional player." They will say, "Oh, I love football. I enjoy it. I want to play football." Those will be the answers. And then what occurs over the next few seasons is the ones who are showing, who are better than other people at that age, that's important. Those who are better than other people at that age start to get fed via parents, aunties, uncles, coaches, other players' parents, this narrative of you could do this as a job. And what the kid then does is go, I could get money for doing this that I'm enjoying. But there's a slight issue, a few issues with this. Number one, the experience that they're having at the age of 7, 8, 9 is far removed from what it will be like when they are 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's a job, it's work, it's physically demanding. There are injuries to deal with. There are, psychological pressures that they are not dealing with when they're 6, 7, 8. And and the second issue, of course, is that at that point in time, they are the best for their age, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the best when they are 16, 17, 18, 19. Now, there's some element of research about this in particular, wider education, where people who are told constantly that they are good at something keeps, their motivation goes and they get more focus on them, so they progress better. And I think that occurs in sport, where people who show promise early on get special attention from coaches, get more game time, more touches, and end up progressing quicker. But there is still the things around sort of relative age effect as people develop at different paces, as they perhaps have a growth spurt, and physically limbs aren't acting in, they're not in control of the limbs in the way that they were when they were 7 or 8, because now they're 14 or 15. There are so many factors at play. And it's why I go back to, what is it you're trying to get from football? And honestly, when you've had a 20-minute chat, parents will say, oh, they might joke, oh, I'd love a Range Rover or whatever. But deep down, the parents want them to be happy. They want them to have a purpose in life. They want them to, enjoy football as much as they can. Actually, kids, when you ask them, even at 15, 16, 17, when they're sort of worried about, oh, will I get a contract? Won't I get a contract? If I say to them, do you love football? Yeah, I do. Would you play for free? Yeah, I would. So why are you getting so hung up on whether you get a professional contract or not? Because if you don't get a professional contract, you've just told me that you would happily play for free. But what they're thinking is, but I enjoy it and somebody's going to give me money to enjoy it. So that's the bit where I think as adults, coaches and things, we sometimes impress on these youngsters this, you could do this for a job. And in there is, I think, also a bias sometimes from parents and adults who haven't been professional players, don't know what it's like, and assume that it's glitz, glam, loads of money, fairly good lifestyle, do something you enjoy as a job. Because we're perhaps, adults are in jobs where they're going, oh, I work on a building site. It must be brilliant to be a footballer. Well, when you speak to footballers, particularly after they've retired, it's not easy. It is harder than you think. It is physically demanding. There are dangers that go along with it. Addiction to drugs, addiction to gambling, sleepless nights, loads of things, relationship breakdown, lack of trust with people, loads and loads of things. And so again, back to what I'm doing, it's trying to get parents to not fall into the trap of this romantic view of it must be unbelievable to be a professional football player, because if their son or daughter does get to that point, they are going to be in for a rude awakening if that's the perception that they have. The athletes that have come onto your podcast no doubt will have reflected on some of the difficult things that they've got to deal with, and you've got to be ready for that. So I think I generally go back to the, when you're 7, 8, 9, get them playing as much as they want, because that's intrinsic motivation. Get them in a play environment as much as possible. So I'm not so much one for a really structured environment when they're young, because, and this has come up a couple of times recently, actually, in the UK, around, are players too robotic? Have we lost flair because they are coached so much that it's not just decision making that goes, but it's experimentation, and that changes into, well, I've been developed as a player who just does this, so I'm just going to do this. And some of the narrative around the Premier League becoming a bit boring because it's heavy possession, it's slowed down a lot, those things. And so for me, even when I'm coaching field hockey, if it's with kids, it's got to be fun, it's got to be experimenting, it's got to be maximizing touches, you know, some constraints, which makes it, and the constraints will be based on some sort of superhero game or something like that, rather than anything, you know, let's play with 2 balls instead of 1 ball. Let's, just change it, just change things up, because they're going to keep their motivation going, want to do it more, have more touches, have more fun doing it. The longer you can keep the fun going, the better, because for the most part, once they start to transition towards pro, it's not as fun. It can still be fun. There's fun elements to it, but it's serious now. It's work, and if they get to the professional level, then results are about paying the bills and paying mortgages and these sorts of things. And then it's really can be, then it can be a high pressure situation. I mean, 2 clubs at the moment. You look at Tottenham. You mentioned them. Manchester United, another one. You look at the players there. That isn't going to be a fun environment right now. That's just not. It's really going to be tough.
Yeah,
Um,
Ruben
the
and
world is looking at them.
Ruben came from my Portuguese club. I'm a sporting fan, and
Ah, okay. Right.
And so I follow this whole career from Casapia to turning Sporting around, and obviously there's always been this connection between Man U and Sporting because of the Ronaldo,
Ronaldo. Yeah.
all these links to the two clubs, and even now Urgate, the midfielder from Uruguay, came from Sporting. Um, Bruno Fernandes came from Sporting. I got to see him play Liverpool at Yankee Stadium in like 2019. Um,
Right.
like a summer friendly. But yeah, I mean, there's the stresses. It's funny because they talk about Ruben, right? He was coaching at Sporting. He was like the second coming of Jesus. Like we loved him. He turned the club around. We were struggling. It was like basically a two-man race in Portugal for a long time, where it was Porto and Benfica, and
Yeah.
then he turned the club around. He was exactly he was young. He had he played the 3-4-3 with wing backs. It was fun to watch. He was fearless in regards to like bringing young players up and giving them field time and developing them, which Sporting's and I think you guys talked about it. Like it's uh, top three academies in the world. Them, Ajax, and I think
Yeah.
it's Boca Juniors in Argentina are like they say are
Right.
three of the top academies in the world. They've no clubs have created more professionals, and so for him to like bring up young players and Portugal's it's a smaller league, so they have to be very good at scouting and they have to be very good at producing players because once somebody gets on the Premier League's radar, you lose them. So you have to be ready to replace them immediately, and they're
Yeah.
very good at
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
it's seeing these young kids in Europe. I mean, I think that's a part of what creates this I guess this not a facade, but it kind of creates this dream of like, hey, this wingback who plays for Sporting is 18, 19, or Tottenham, Gray, who I mean, I think he's
Yeah.
another great young talent. And you see these guys. So and then if you're a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old, you're like, that could be me in another 5, 10 years, and so I think it does kind of create this dream. But do you feel like like is there and again this kind of goes back to what I said before, like what is success, right? Like there is a lot of like we and I think it's not just athletes, I think it's celebrities in general, and I think a lot of kids are like, I want to be a famous YouTuber, and I want to
Yeah.
be I want to be a famous celebrity, and then you look at all the celebrities you're idolizing and you realize their personal lives are a complete disaster and they're addicted
Yes.
to drugs
Yeah.
and because
I think if those it's hard, isn't it? Because I think when we were young as well, you look thinking must be unbelievable to just have loads of money. But the, you can list a lot of play. In fact, I released a blog today. I do a blog a week off the back of the research, and I just and I've been for a couple of months just every time I've come across a story of somebody who's struggling financially in football from the past, one was obviously like Diego Maradona is a good example, but George Best is a good, but I've just written them down, and the list just goes on and on. You asked me about books, actually. This is a really good book on that. Let's get it on the screen.
the next big thing.
Yeah, and it's just there's another one about the academy system actually, which I've not read yet. It's on the to-do list, but um, and the assumption that money will bring happiness is just such a falsehood, and I get it, it helps. But one of the elements of work that I do with young players and their families is to say, if somebody gave you $2,500 next week per week, if somebody gave you $5,000 per week next week, do you know what to do with it? Because if you don't know now, then by the time you've got the money, it's too late. Everybody's going to want to be your financial advisor. Everybody's going to want to date you. Everybody's going to want to be your friend. And everyone's going to want to sell you stuff. People are going to be getting in touch on social media with cars, watches. And now you've got an issue because who do you trust? How do you pick out who's come to you because of the money you've got versus who's come to you because they want to be your friend, they want to be your partner? Do you see what I mean? And so it's really, really important before this journey starts that you start to develop a network, that you start to develop ways in which you are going to invest that money, ways in which you are going to um, well, use that money, for example. So, I mean, a conversation with a parent that I was having today is good around this. Whereas, if you get a first year professional contract and you take it, then that causes issues for trying to get a scholarship at an American university because you've been a professional. And he was sort of saying, "All right, right, yeah, I didn't realize that." But that opened up a really good conversation of, but if they're offering you £2,500 a week at the age of 18, you could be banking some of that money. And then if things don't turn out, maybe the conversation that you have is, look, you want to do this dream. So we're all in with you. Let's go for it. You're not going to get another chance. It's £2,500 a week. That's pretty decent for an 18-year-old. But we invest a chunk of that money so that it returns some interest so that we can then use that lump sum of money for going to America and doing a degree if this doesn't work out. Do you see what I mean? And now we've had that conversation, and we're having that conversation when the kid's 16. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And then we'll have another discussion about what if you don't get anything at 18, what we're going to do. It's just such a more controlled way of doing things. And um, that's the element of, the financial side of it, the financial planning. I think the temptation is that money is going to solve a lot of problems. Well, it also comes with some problems. It also comes with things. Stephen Bartlett, who's the Diary of a CEO, you've come across Stephen Bartlett?
I know the name, yeah.
So the Diary of a CEO is a really big podcast in this country, and I think probably further afield as well. To be fair to him, and he grew up in Manchester with pretty much nothing. I think he was having to steal food and stuff to feed himself when he was a kid. He was in real bad shape, and he wrote down in his diary, and this is how the podcast came about, that by the time he was 24, I think it was something like, I want to be a millionaire. I want to own a house in the country and I want to have a Range Rover. It was something he wrote a list. He developed a company, I think it was called Social Chain, and became a millionaire. Went to buy his Range Rover, bought his Range Rover, went to buy a house in the country and thought, this is not what I thought this was going to be like. This this has made no difference to who I am. This these tangible things that I thought would just make me happy aren't doing any of that. Aren't doing any of that at all. And I think there's a temptation with sports people as well, because the lives of those who we look at are filtered through social media and filtered through press releases, filtered through interviews where they're allowed to say a few things but don't say everything. They're very well media trained, that we don't get the full story until they retire. And then we get an idea of, oh, okay, that's what the thing's actually like. And I think you've got a better chance of having a good time in football, making the most of it, enjoying your time in football if you are prepared for what it is actually going to be like, not prepared for this romantic view of what you think it's like, and then when you get there and it's not, then you're in trouble. That's another good book, actually. Let's go with that one. We're doing well on the book reviews here, aren't we? Retired by
What happens to players when the game stops?
yeah, Alan
And
Gurner.
that's actually a quite common problem for professional athletes because
I
that's
mean, NFL, NBA, great examples.
it consumes their lives, and then your whole life revolves around training, getting better, traveling, press conferences, and then all of a sudden everything stops, and it's like, what do I do with all this extra time? It's
Yeah,
my father's very old school. He's I was born in a farm in northern Portugal in Chaves, and or near Chaves, and it was they just always outside, always doing things with his hands. Oh, farmer's life is like sun up to sundown. So when he came to America, he kind of does the same thing, and he's getting a little older with age, and people are like, when is he going to retire? I'm like, hopefully never, because I'm
you
like,
know what you do.
it reminds me of this conversation. It's like, because I don't know what he needs, and then it's
Yeah,
a hard next chapter in life to all of a sudden stop doing the thing that consumes much of your life and gives you a reason to get up every morning and
Yeah.
try to find something new to fill that emptiness. And that is a struggle for a professional athlete. That's why I think loving it is so important because,
Yeah.
my kids, like Jose Mourinho says, in Europe, soccer is not well, he says football, it's not a sport, it's a religion. There's a passion for it, right? And
Yeah.
in America, we're completely missing that. Like soccer is a hobby in America. It's not a passion. Kids
Yeah.
leave the football club. They stop after practice is over. They don't think about soccer. They don't touch a soccer ball. They don't. When my son was growing up, and I still I absolutely love sports. I still play soccer. I try to play soccer at least once a week. I play basketball at least once a week. I'm like an addict who like I need to do it at least once a week. I'm a better
Yeah.
person. I get some of that
Yeah.
frustration out. I love the problem solving. I love the pushing myself past fatigue. I love all that, the competitive nature of it. And he's always been around that. And I've,
Yeah.
I instilled like, for example, yesterday morning, morning here, we were playing the Wolves, the Spurs. We watched the Spurs game. We're all wearing our Spurs gear. We're all getting mad at the TV as we blow every, we just stumble and make dumb mistakes. But it's like we're enjoying it as a family, right? And then
Yeah.
hopefully Thursday, when they hopefully play better, we'll enjoy the ups and downs of sports. So we love it. So my son has this like, and my daughter, they just have this love for sports, and people are always like, "Hey, how do you get your kids so into soccer?" I mean, he literally wears a different soccer jersey every day of the week. That's literally all
Right.
he wears. My wife's always like, "Is he going to wear another soccer jersey in school pictures?" I'm like, "It's him. He loves it." I'm like,
Yeah.
why take that away from him? I'm like, and to me, like that's something that you'll see with like the pros. Like I've had Pat Miletich on. He's a UFC MMA legend. I've had so many of these guys, and they like. I mean, MMA is a perfect example because there's no money in it. Like there's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of money in MMA. So if you want to get punched in the face for a living, like and there's not a lot of money in it, you're doing it because you love it.
Yeah.
And well, one or two things, right? Like and I think that you guys talked about it on the Project Footballer podcast about like, is it okay to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to even talk about plan B. Like this is my plan A, and I'm not going to talk. And I know some people like there's conflicting opinions on like if that's a good way of going about it or not. But I
Yeah.
kind of feel like, those are people who usually succeed because the people who give up, or everybody else who doesn't have that mindset might give up too soon.
Well, yeah. So my take on this is it's fairly simple. It's actually this is all plan A, and there's a few things that I ban when I'm working with parents and players, and talking of plan B is banned. But that's because this if you want to be a good player, if you want to immerse yourself in training sessions, in pro contracts, you can't be playing with a level of anxiety that is through the roof because you're worried about how you might pay a mortgage. You just can't. That's not a good state to be in. So, what I'm advocating is by doing very simple things, actually, you can stay focused on football, but not solely focused at the expense of absolutely everything else. And by doing some other things, you are both safeguarding a future should you not get a professional contract and making yourself a better player. So a really good example of that is leadership. You know, if I was to have a coach, if we got a coach on this podcast and I said, what would you be after? I guarantee you they will say needs to have a good attitude. Okay, so what's a good attitude? Works for the team, not himself. Okay, in on time, um, leader, picks people up when they're down, constantly motivated, can encourage people. Well, that's leadership 101. So actually, by reading a book about leadership, it could be Quiet Leadership, Carlo Ancelotti, be here somewhere. But it could be somebody who's not, who's a leader from a different sector, not football. What about going and learning a language? Because actually now how you can speak three languages. You can speak English, Spanish, and German. Not only has that helped you in terms of broadening the market that you might be able to go and play in, but see if you do get a pro contract and you get people into the club who are struggling, you are a crucial now member of that team for making that person feel welcome. It doesn't have to be either or. Um, and likewise, there are some players who want some time away from the pressure of football. They want some release where they go and do something that is completely different. I thought it was really interesting yesterday. Been all over the news today here that Rory McIlroy's win at the Masters. 14 years of, being close, and is he going to do it this year? I thought it was really interesting that his approach yesterday, Bryson DeChambeau was out hitting 5 bags of balls on the range till quite late at night. The immerse myself, must do this. McIlroy was, I'm just going to turn my phone off. I'm going to go home. I'm going to play with my kid and just have a good time. Just chill out, get to bed early, get up, play with the kid a bit more, and then I'm just going to go and play around at golf. It was a fantastic example of how some people need to remove themselves from the pressure cooker, and McIlroy spending more time studying the course and all this. He's clearly got to a point of going, that's actually detrimental to me. I'm much better as a player if I am relaxed out there. And that's what I would advocate. It is, to coin a phrase, horses for courses. Some people want to be more immersed, but some people want to go, I spend a lot of time doing football. I need my brain to be somewhere else sometimes. Otherwise, I'm just going to stew on a mistake that I've made. I'm going to stew on, will I get the next contract? And it's not healthy. So there's, I get what you're saying around the, right, we've got to go for it. And that's why I ban it. This is all plan A. This is all plan A. The other thing with ban is, he's like, I don't know, will my kid be, the one? Banned. Your kid's already the one because they're your son. So they will make it in something in life and you're always going to love them. The last thing they need is somebody close to them putting some sort of value judgment on them being the one relating to sport. Like, because they might give absolutely everything, not get a contract, and think, no, mum and dad were, yeah, they said I wasn't going to be the one. Don't go near that. Like, they're already the one. They're your kid. They're already the one that you're going to love eternally, forever, and all these sorts of stuff. And will they make it? Yeah, they'll make it. It might not be in football, but they'll make it. They'll make it something. They can make it be a millionaire. I could give you a list of jobs that on average would earn more than a footballer at, a League One, League Two, League National League level. So let's and the final thing that's banned is, are we making the right decision? We only know what's the right decision or the wrong decision with hindsight. You've got to make a decision, and you've got to understand the consequences of that decision, and that's the best place you can be. Because there's not a lot of rational thinking when it comes to things that are highly emotive, like sport. Am I going to go for my chances of making it are 0.5% in the Premier League? But if Tottenham came knocking, you'd go, I'm going to give it a go. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? We all would. So let's not, because, if we were looking at it from the outside, completely objectively, you'd go, it's probably not the right decision. It's a much safer bet if you went to university, or as we call it, college over there, and developed in a way that is measured and is going to definitely get you to somewhere. But that's not going to happen. So let's not pretend that we've got right or wrong decisions. We've just got decisions to make, consequences from that decision, which we can talk about, and then support in that environment for what's happening, and probably a dose of honesty along the way, and then we'll be fine. We can't tell you where you're going to end up, but we can tell you that when we come out the other side, we'll be all right. We won't be one of the people who's struggling, lost, trial after trial after trial, with little money in the bank, wondering if somebody will just give you something. That's where we don't want to end up. So that would be my approach to it. It's all plan A. Let's not talk about right or wrong decisions. Let's not talk about who making it. Let's not talk about is it going to be the one? Is already the one, or we will make it somewhere. But we can do that in football and develop as a person as well. If your child get some MLS team, are interested in him, but you've already brought him up to be a good kid. You've already brought him up with manners. You've already brought him up to be, to understand what teamwork is. Let's foster that. Let's use the environment that we're in to develop, because everybody out there in society, if you then went on to be a coach, or you went on to work in the media, or you went on to go in a completely different direction and set up your own business, these are all good skills. These are all good things. And that includes actually some of the bad bits. So players, when they will say to me, and this does come up quite a bit, the coach is lying to me. All right, how does that make you feel? And they'll tell me, remember that, because when you're captain, or when you're a coach, you've got to remember how you felt when you're then leading other people, because it will happen. You might go to a different sector, you might work something that's not in football. Remember that. How was it when you knew that they were lying to you, and they lied to your face, and that's an experience that somebody like having that at 16 is really, really useful for them, their personal development, and it's all plan A.
Well, it's one of my favorite quotes. A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. Like,
Absolutely.
you're a huge part of that child's development. Those adolescence years. I mean, we've all reflected on conversations we've had with adults that maybe didn't seem significant to the adult, but stuck with us forever and was a huge, inspiration or influence on our lives. And I never take for granted that like any conversation or interaction I have with a kid could be one of those conversations. And if I can, help them pursue sports, great. But if I can just help them, learn some life lessons, be a great person, and other qualities, and just be a mentor, then that's equally as important, if not more. So it's
Yeah,
that,
I agree.
without a doubt. And it's
It's
the
not easy either, by the way, is it? That
no.
when it's not. It sounds like I'm just having to go to the coach, because that's not. It's not easy to do. I remember watching a documentary with Doc Rivers, and him talking in depth about his approach, which was just mesmerized me in a way. And now him became really interested in it. But there was a quote in that documentary of, "But this isn't easy. This isn't." It's almost like he understood that he was taking a harder path. Um, but he was like, "But this is the right way to do this. To get to know the person before the player, to ask about worries and give a safer space for people to open up." Now, that's not easy if you're in a coaching position. It's perhaps not your only job. You've, you know, you've come from a work an environment. You've gone to training. It's, as it probably is in England, it's raining, and you've not had anything to eat yet. And then, yeah, and you're thinking, well, actually, somebody wants to talk to me, and in your mind, I'm tired, I'm soaking wet. It's not an easy. It's not always easy to do. Um,
But that's
but
why loving it is so important because it's you hear like musicians, right, playing these crappy little shows where nobody shows up, but you can continue doing it. You still play music. You still, you're sleeping in the back of a van, but it's like, so what motivates you to go through all that? It's your
yeah,
love for your passion, for that music, for creating music, for playing. It brings you some pleasure that outweighs all those other things. And the same thing with like with sports. Like if you're doing it, and that's why musicians are kind of a good example because you got like the musicians who are like, hey, this type of music, this genre is very popular right now, or this sound is really popular. Let me just play that because I want to make money. And then they're the ones who don't last. And then the music that is timeless, they're the ones who pursued music because they loved it, not because they were financially trying to get ahead. I think
yeah,
with athletes, it's very similar. Some of them might just have like, hey, this I don't want a real job, and this is a great alternative to working a 9 to 5. but maybe they don't love it, right? And then you get the ones who are like, they absolutely love it. Every time it's training day, they're excited. Like my son, he if it rains and there's a chance of canceling a practice, he's upset. I know kids he plays with that are excited that cancel gets practice. So it's like it's
Yeah,
love for why do people my age, I'm turning 40, like why am I still playing? Like I'm not. It's not even. I don't get any financial gain out of it. I'm paying to play.
yeah,
Potentially could get hurt, and then at 40, you could be out for a while. But I'm still
yeah,
doing it because I love it. So it's like that love for it, that passion for it. I think that's an indicator in a young kid that like gets overlooked sometimes because I'll see kids that I'm like, yeah, he's not quite there yet, but he loves it. And it's like that saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And
yeah,
if they love it, they're just gonna keep going at it. And a lot of these pro athletes, Michael Jordan being one of them, Kevin Garnett, Cristiano Ronaldo, I mean, a lot of greats, all those people who doubted them, they just use it as fuel. They use it as motivators. It's like, oh, okay, you don't think I'm good enough? I'm going to remember this, or I'm going to, next time I'm training, I'm going to go a little harder. I'm going to work a little,
yeah,
so it's like you use those things as motivation.
yeah. And one of the elements I would encourage parents to talk about um with kids is okay, intrinsic, extrinsic motivations quite perhaps tricky for kids when they're what 14, 15. But on a level we can talk about how the inner drive is much more purposeful for them. Um and that's the bit that they should be focusing on, which it's hard to do because they're bombarded with information suggesting that these extrinsic rewards are the things that are um you know the best things in life. And research, case studies, talking to people, we know that that's not the case. So trying to keep them, I think this is a bit where I get with coaches, where you will get some perhaps old school coaches or some parents who go, oh, we've really ever got to, we get told just to ask them if they're enjoying themselves and if the, but the point is that that is so crucial for longevity. So if you start moving them away from focusing on the internal drivers, eventually they will just leave the game. It's just it's like a downward spiral. The more you focus on, I had the conversation at school gates today of, well, I think we saw somebody play. Yes, yeah, they won. And for me, I go, all right. So straight away, I'm thinking that that was the only thing that you were measuring that by, the only thing. And winning is the product, the byproduct of the process that we go through when we play and when we coach. So if the pro so actually the process of getting kids on the pitch, how many times parents and coaches will say to me, they've just played with a relaxed, they played with a smile on the face, and oh, and lo and behold, they played well when they were in that space, did they? Rather than thinking, oh, I better not make a mistake. So, or by going with by pushing forward this, oh we won. Eventually, I promise you'll get to a point where the players start to think we better not lose. They'll start to interpret that as, oh, right, okay, so it's only good if we win, so we better not lose. And before you know it, not as the younger, because they can't process it like this, but as they develop bit by bit, they'll start to think, right, so it's important we don't lose, not let's go and win, or let's go and just play. And like Rory McIlroy talked about yesterday, actually, all he needed to do was get on that course and just play a round of golf. And the likelihood is, if he just played a round of golf, he was probably going to have enough. Not right. How do I stand here? How do I win this thing? So, and I think focusing on the internal motivations. Oh, so you would play for free. So that means you love this. Why did you pick the ball up in the first place? Why did your kid, you know, that's what you focus on. And the hard bit in that is then also having a discussion of, you do also need room for your child to turn around to you and say, I don't want to do this anymore. There's Because if you're not that person for them, where are they going to be able to do that? And that is also absolutely fine. It's not the end of the world if that happens. They will likely find another sport, they'll find another passion. It's probably the environment that they're in that they are going, I've, and by the way, this happens with professional players, I've just fallen out of love with this game. And you'll have some professional players who will be playing because it's like, well, but this is my job, so I'm just going to get my head down and do this. But I don't love it like I used to. And likewise, we have some players who I got a message from a friend actually the other day who he'd coached a kid, perhaps when he was 8 or 9, bumped into him again when he was 14, been released from a club, and he's like, I don't even play anymore at all. And the guy was recollecting and saying, oh, it's just heartbroken that he just don't play football at all anymore. But there has to be room for that, and it not be like at this devastating, oh no. Well, if they fell out of love with the game when they were 14, 15, 16, they were never going to be able to sustain a career. It's fine. They'll find something else. They'll go and play ice hockey. They'll go and play something else and find passion in that. They might actually even go through the life playing like 4 different sports over the period, and that's fine as well because they're keeping physically active. It's keeping social relationship. It's just that sports not now become the profession in their lives. It's become the hobby you spoke about before, and probably the role that it is in your life now. And they'll find, and then they'll find something else to do, and it's okay. I think it's really important that a parent is that for the kid. Um, I often say if the dream becomes the parent's dream, then we've got a problem because how is the kid going to turn around and say that they don't want to do it anymore? They what happens is they don't, and then they just keep going, put a facade on, and keep going at this thing. But eventually, it falls away because once it becomes difficult, once there's rejection in there, the internal motivation's gone,
Well,
and it's not their fault. It's like, yeah. So you, as a parent, you've got to have that space. As difficult it is, because some people have paid a lot of money to keep this thing going, to keep paying for them to go on trials or camps and tours and these things. But there just has to be that room for them to turn around and go, I don't want to do it anymore, and for the parent to be go, that's fine, I will still love you. That's all the kid wants to know. That sort of has to be there.
yeah, and I think so. You had a diagram that I believe is on your website, and you guys talked about it on Project Footballer that I found really fascinating, where it was like two circles, and one was a player, one was club, and then you
Yeah,
had where it met. And I think some of the culprit for why some people fall in out of love with sports sometimes is the fact that the club focuses more on them winning and those type of successes more than the child's success. And this is a common theme with like in America with club soccer where they spend so much time on tactics and being disciplined and that part of the game that you lose a little. It becomes overcoaching, right? You have very little freedom to try things. You end up being successful because you're very disciplined and you pass and you move and you pass. But I remember I think it was Richie Allen who said it during his Project Footballer appearance, where he talked about, he's like, a lot of these players, he's like, if by the time you're 11, or I don't know if he said 11 or or playing 11v11, but either way, when there's a certain point where once you get to a certain age, if you're not a dribbler, you're never going to be a dribbler. And what happened is that club has produced a very good, just somebody who is good tactically in their system, a system player,
yeah,
and then you take them and you put them in another situation, they won't stick out. They'll have a hard time adapting to new styles. And a lot of it, and that's why I'm a big fan of futsal in Portugal. It's very big
yeah,
in Latin
yeah,
America. It's very big. Spain, France, like because it gives room for freedom. Gives you room for creativity. It challenges you in a different way. You can't, now you're getting a lot of, I guess it's always been popular in some countries, but now in America, you're starting to see the popularity of playing out of the back, right? Because the Americans want to play like the Europeans. So now it's like,
Yeah.
every club team is like, we're trying to play out of the back. They're trying to
You know,
be.
we can't do it. We're going to keep doing
Yeah,
it.
exactly. But in futsal, right? Like you can only pass it back once to the goalie. So it
Yeah.
forces a kid to have to take somebody on 1v1, build that confidence, have that courage. And so it's a real common theme where you get these clubs in America, they're like, hey, look, they're winning a lot of trophies and tournaments and all this stuff. And then you watch them play and coach, and you're like, oh, they're just so disciplined tactically, but these kids, as individuals, they're being
Yeah.
stunted their growth a little bit because of
Yeah.
the way they're training. Well, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think it's as is often the case, money drives the um, money drives the system, and football clubs in England make money. People often think that academies are free in England, and they're not. They 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 end up being paid when they're 16, but below that, clubs try to operate by making money off getting kids in, and and then there's a second element where I see quite a lot of one-on-one private coaching being paid for, which again is just such a structured environment. I honestly think when a kid is young, give them a ball and a space, and let them play and let them enjoy. As a dad who I was working with, um, mentioned this one-on-one coaching, and he's like, "Oh, the coach is good." And I said, "So do you go?" Yeah. So he was paying quite a bit of money for one-on-one coaching while he stood on the sideline. And I said to him, for the next month, twice a week, why don't you go with your son and just play? Find a field. He will enjoy that far more. You'll build a relationship. He's like, I'm not a coach. Fine, just play. Play one on one. You'll be fine. Play one on one. Play crossing and see if you can edit. Play. What does he want to work on? Have a chat. What are you what are you not confident? All right, let's have a competition then with your left foot. Me versus you. Uh, I actually said to him, I said, I can't remember. Let's say it was £50 for this coaching session. I can't remember what it was. I said, use that £50 and incentivize the games by giving him money. He'll love it. Like when I was younger, taking some money off my dad. Oh, what a dream! Like yes, £10. I won £10 off dad because we had a competition to see if we could hit the post with our left foot. I mean, the that is so much more of an environment where the kid is just adapting to different situations and motivation in all right, I'm saying there's money on it, but the intrinsic motivation, great way to build relationship with dad and kid. Don't focus too much on you know technique or any of this. Just let them develop it, let them learn for themselves. And that's my frustration with, we have pre-academies in the UK where parents get in touch with me, or Man City are looking at my kid, he's 5. I'm thinking, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? That is just not healthy. Um, and I always say to them, look, right, well, just ask him if he enjoys it, and if he enjoys it, let him keep going. But if he says no, you've got to be prepared to go. Right, he's not enjoying it anymore. We're not putting onto him that we want him to still go because he's 6 years old and we think he might be a professional. Let's take him to a club where he is enjoying himself. The one around the corner where all his mates play. And that, yeah, that's my take on it. Of the, there's so much money to be made from from these dreams from young players who perhaps and parents who just think that we can solve this by more coaching. Clubs clubs use it as a way of yeah maybe trying to pick somebody up. Private academies, will sometimes um, talk about the players who've made it and things as a way of selling places on what they do. I think you just got to be very, very careful as a parent, and I still I'm the one who I would advocate fun. Yeah, more touches, fun, and I've parents say to me, "Oh, I make sure he does 10,000 touches a day." I think, well, that research is flawed, but all right, but as long as it's in a fun environment, as long as it's not you going right, we do 500 with your left foot, 500 with your right foot. I mean, grueling and boring, and it eventually won't work. It won't work.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? Because it's like
Of course it is. Yeah.
you can't let your kid, or even as a coach, it's like you want to extract the best out of them. And kids will look for the path of least resistance sometimes, right? They'll take the easy way out. So you want to push them, but like you said, it can't stop being fun. It has to be a balance because I know so many stories of people, a guy who plays basketball with me. He's like, I coach my kids in basketball their whole lives. He's like, all I could do. He's like, I always imagined them playing in college, and I thought I was helping them and pushing them or whatever. He's like, once they graduated high school, they're like, I don't want to play in college. He's like,
Mhm.
I'm done with basketball. He's like, I've lost interest, and he's like, it broke his heart. But he's like, he reflected, and he's like, I pushed them
He was
too
the
much.
problem.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like, and you see with parents on the sidelines, right? Like I'm very honest with my kids. I want them to work hard. I want them to, have high standards for themselves. Always give 100% effort. Don't half-ass anything. I've always been that way where I'm like, if I do anything, I'm not going to half-ass it. I'm going to give you
You're
100%
the problem.
of my effort. So it's like instilling that hardware, and it doesn't have to be just sports. I mean, you'll learn. It's a great place to practice that,
Yeah.
and but that those type of lessons will I think help you in many other pursuits in your life. But you can't stop it from being fun. I have my kids play town soccer too. I coach them in town soccer and they play club soccer. And there's a lot of club soccer coaches that don't like kids who play outside of the club, right? It's like, I always say, I'm like, you joined a club, not a cult. I'm like, you
Yeah.
should be able to have the freedom to, play with other people, and whatnot and do other things. And but for me, it's like anytime I get a chance of putting my kids in like a clinic that looks like, they get to be fun and it's maybe, not as it's not overcoaching or whatever. I put them everywhere because I'm like, I want them to be environments where it's like soccer's not always like because the club soccer it's about like, oh, this is your position, we got a tournament coming up, we got to prepare for it. And I don't know,
Yeah.
there's always and then it's like you want to have some opportunities where it's just like, hey, just go out and have fun, like go out. I grew up
Or
playing.
different sports. I mean, that's another thing.
Yeah, and there are things, but it's funny because I have like mixed feelings with this. Like coming, I grew up playing a lot of actually more basketball than soccer, and I grew up playing a lot of street basketball and just going to courts and whatever. Because in Europe you have street soccer, right? People you can go find kids playing anywhere. In
Yeah.
America, there is no street soccer. It's like if but basketball or American football were kind of what kids were doing outside. So I
Yeah.
got really caught up in basketball. But I think that you know that creativity and that like not having a coach around, not having playing with different age groups, right? Because if you're going to play pickup
Yeah.
soccer or basketball,
Yeah.
and you might get kids that are a couple years older than you, a couple of years younger than you, kids who play Division 1, Division 2, kids who never played organized, and you play and so you learn, and there's a lot of lessons and things that you get from that instead of just being always coached, always adult there telling you what not to do and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I think and so do you see that similar issues in England?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a debate. It's still, and it astounds me that it's still a debate around early specialization in coaching literature. Um, Before I did the business that I'm doing now, I worked in higher education, um, on sport coaching courses, and we regularly had sort of debates with the students around early specialization and how detrimental it is for development. because underneath all of the sports that you can, be professional in are what are often described as like the fundamentals of movement, of balance, these sort of coordination. By putting those elements into different environments, you are developing them. And basketball is a great example of you're constantly jumping up and down. If you went to a kid, right, we need to do box jumps, like box jumps. Right, let's play basketball. They'd be doing it. It's short, sharp sprints. There are things that if you went to uh, speed, agility, quickness training, or if you went into a gym, an academy, you would see people doing things that are not far off what you would just do if you were doing, if you were playing tennis, change of direction, squash, another good example. And yeah, but this obsession with, well, yeah, but if you're not focusing on football, and I go back to what I said around it's all plan A, you can focus on other things that help you in football and other things. Like this duality, this separation it's
So,
just made
so
up. It's
let me
just not the reality.
let me be the devil's advocate just because I'm curious on
Yeah,
what your perspective is. So and I've similar to yourself, like I've struggled to know where I stand on this issue, and I go back and forth because there's plenty of cases of people like you said who play multiple sports. Like even some of the best football players in American football, you find out, oh, they played a little bit of basketball too. They were good, basketball players. Or you
yeah.
get like,
Patrick Mahomes.
yeah, Patrick Mahomes, perfect example. Or LeBron James, right? He played football and he played basketball. So there's plenty, Caitlin Clark, she was a big soccer fan. She played soccer growing up. And I mean Steve Nash, right? You
Yeah,
sometimes would see him juggling he's a Spurs fan. He see him juggling a basketball, and so you see that. But and then there's also a lot of examples of like countries, like for example, Dominican, right? The best baseball players come out of Dominican, not only Dominican, but like there, Japan. The best, some of the best soccer players come out of obviously Europe, where they eat, breathe that sport, and in many cases, like that's been at least 90% of their focus. So it's like there's examples on both sides where you see people succeed who like literally that sport is their religion, nothing else matters. Like Cristiano Ronaldo didn't play anything else. He basically was just a footballer. But and then
yeah,
there's plenty of examples of people who did do other things. So it's like, do you think that it's different for each individual, or like why do you think that there are?
yeah. So I think Cristiano Ronaldo would be a really good example of the he's got unbelievable intrinsic motivation for that. And if a kid was going, oh no, I don't want to, I don't want to go ice skating, I wouldn't be like, I'd go back to the wall. All right, so if you're enjoying playing football, fine. Like that's not. I don't see that necessarily as the issue. I think it's when there are elements where people will be, oh, like he wants to play, he wants to swim as well. That's fine. It's not going. They get into this idea of going, oh no, but if he swims, that's time when he could be doing more development in football. You've no way of making that relationship causal of going, oh, but so that means he's not going to be as good a football player. Well, he's developing fitness wise in a swimming pool. So I think, yeah, I do think there's an element of it being intrinsically motivated in some of those examples. But where I would be coming from, um, fundamentally, first and foremost, I don't think that as parents, when kids are 5, 6, 7, we should be in a space of going, I'm going to make you a professional footballer because that is just something you can't do. So then I go to actually what you want to do is make sure that this kid has a relationship with sport and physical activity till he is 65, 70, and beyond. So that's got to be intrinsically driven. If in the process of doing that, so how do we do that? We introduce them to a wide sporting repertoire. We give them as many tools as we possibly can, and then they're likely to find something that they enjoy. In doing that, if they go, football's the one that I enjoy the most, and then they get really good at it, That's fine. That's the process in which players should gravitate towards club soccer, then towards academies from the age of 10, 11, 12. You know, I wouldn't be putting somebody in an academy when they were 8, 6, 7, 8. Like, I just wouldn't. And and then from that, you're then going, they've now built up a base of they are actually really loving this. That's the way we've got them. For somebody to come to me with a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or even a 6 or a 7-year-old going, right, how do we make them a professional player? I'd be going, are you bonkers? Are you utterly bonkers? Ask them what they like to do. If at that point they only want to play football, that's fine. Play football, but we still shouldn't be having discussions with them at 6, 7, 8, 9 of going, and do you want to be a professional player? Do you think you could make it to a professional player? I mean, that to me is the adult imposing on that young kid an ideological belief and a hope that they might be a professional player. I would still be going, are they enjoying it? Fine. All he does when he comes home from school is he puts his football kit on and he goes out on the back garden and he wants to kick about a football. Absolutely sparkling. Brilliant. And so we take him to a club. Brilliant. And does he enjoy that? Yeah. Loves it. Brilliant. And then on a weekend, I take him and go to the local field and he just wants to play football there with me. Brilliant. That is, do you see how that's a different conversation from right? But so I'm not going to let him do any other sports because I want him to be a pro. It's driven by the kid. It's kid centered. The kid's driving the enthusiasm, and there'll be an element of like, right, come on, I don't want you on a computer game. I want you outside. What should we go out and do? Fine, that's the element. But when we're talking about them getting serious, getting into clubs, take them to those places if they enjoy it and if they are thriving, and if with a little bit of cajoling, go give it another go, see how we, which happens with like nursery and school as well. Yeah, I'm all right. That's the space that we want to be in before we get to 14, 15, when it's going to start developing. And yeah, and then we're starting to talk about, okay, they've got some real promise here. They're really good. They've still got that intrinsic motivation. They're really still showing that they want to develop. Then I think it becomes a different conversation. Um,
Yeah, I agree. It's like the only time I guess it would be an issue is if he wants to go play football and you're like, hey, I know you want to train more, more football training, but I think that playing multiple sports is a good idea. So let me take you away from that and do something else. I think, but those are like rare examples where that's the case. I think in many cases, like you're saying, it's a kid who's like, hey, I don't want to. I'm a little burnt out playing this sport, and it's fun to do something different and challenge myself in a different way. So it's like if your options are okay, he's done, he's ready, full of soccer training for a week. Like you can't add any more to it, or he's going to get burned out. But all
yeah,
spare time, instead of being on YouTube, he wants to go play basketball or hockey or something else. It's like, isn't that a better use of his time than,
yeah,
so yeah, absolutely. And it is, again, every individual is slightly different and, but I know it's late in the UK. I've probably kept you up a little bit and I can't thank you enough for taking the
no,
time to
no, it's been a pleasure.
yeah, it's been a blast. For people listening who want to keep up with maybe your blog, keep up with your research, anything that you might be doing, where's the best place to get a hold of you and keep up with your work?
Yep. So, www.chrisplatts.co.uk is the website. There's a blog a week on there. There's some resources on there as well. So I release a blog a week. There's a newsletter from there. If you want to drop me an email, it's info@chrisplatts.co.uk. Anybody who wants to jump on and have just a chat with me, before we work together, I go through a process of making sure I'm right for them and they're right for me. So for me, I jump online. There's a free half an hour, 45 minutes chat, like consultation, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But it's really a case of, look, if you've got questions, I love finding out about people's journeys. People have contacted me from all over the world, and it's really good to find out what's going on. And the USA is a good example of how things are slightly different. And it's really, really interesting for me to find out. So drop me a line. You can sign up on the website for a free chat online. And that's the best way of getting in touch with me. I'm on, and or LinkedIn. Yeah, Dr. Chris Platts on LinkedIn. And I tend to put my blogs on there, obviously repost stuff and have a few discussions around LinkedIn as well. People want to get in touch. So I'm all ears. It's been a fantastic journey and learning about how people are approaching this. And if I can offer them solutions, if I can help them, then that's obviously a win-win. That's brilliant. That's how we get the job done.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for being on. Have you thought about starting a Substack?
I have because yes, I've got a friend who's got that as well. So there's so many. I'm not even on Instagram. I get told off by like, you're not. I'm just I don't know. I'm all, it's one of those. You've got so many different elements that you're thinking, right? Can I do them all? Can I keep them all going? I'm recording my own podcast, and I want to get that up and off the ground to get people on and discussing some of these things and some guest blogs. So yeah, it's one of those things that's been on my radar because I've got a friend who's doing it, and but I've not got around to doing it yet. So I should keep my eye on that. And your football club, remind me who it is again, because when we had this email back and forth, I ended up for like an hour on your website looking.
Yeah, the Pioneers, Western United Pioneers, and
That's it.
it's out of it started off actually. There's a Portuguese club in town that started a soccer team, and then it was called like the Luso, I forget what they were called, but and then eventually they joined the USL League, and then the leagues that in those leagues you can't have. It's kind of silly because in England I kind of like the historic uh um connection between the names of the clubs and the towns and whatnot.
Yes, yes,
But in America, because we got to be politically correct all the time, they didn't want any connection to like a nationality or anything like that, so they had to
right.
go with like a generic name. They couldn't
Yeah,
use something that had Luso in it that was a kind of connection to the Portuguese, influence of the club. And so
right.
it started there. And then we have like a very old school, looks like a old school, uh, basically soccer stadium, concrete walls all the way around, and it's
Yeah,
really cool. It's all turf, and then we have a couple grass fields, and because of the so this little town, Ludlow, we're actually in the Soccer Hall of Fame because we've had some of the best like high school teams, and it's a small town that's kind of accomplished a lot. And but we've had some like friendlies here. Like Sporting's actually been here. I was real little when they came here. They played like
right.
Everton came here one year
Yeah,
a
right.
long time ago, and it's like there's so many foreigners here that I mean I coach basketball in this town and soccer. All my basketball players show up in soccer jerseys. That's
Really.
yeah, it's funny because I'm like, we're the only town that everybody shows up to. Most towns like nobody's even wearing a soccer jersey. In our town, like everybody shows up to basketball practice in like a City jersey or a Benfica jersey or a Bayern Munich jersey, and I'm like, this is hilarious. I'm like, this is,
Yeah,
but it's so deep rooted in our DNA that we just everybody grew up just loving it and just
yeah,
watching it, and they're very proud. Like there's a big Polish and Portuguese community, so the Portuguese are very proud of their just obviously we've produced a lot of great players and proud of the soccer team. And growing up, my parents like they never watched me play basketball, like never. Like they first time they ever watched me play basketball was in a basketball tournament that I was in, that my wife was working and I needed somebody to sit with my kids because they're like really small, and I'm like, I need someone to watch the kids. And it was the first time that they watched me, because to them it was like soccer was the only thing that mattered. Basketball was like a hobby. It was like,
yeah,
so I think some of that passion has gotten instilled in me a little bit. But it is a cool little, a little spot that it's for such a small town has really had some amazing, high school teams, and the club does really well. But as a board member on at the club, having listening to Project Football, or getting exposed to people like yourself and many other, like there's a podcast called the 343 podcast, which is pretty good. That's they talk about a lot of American soccer and whatnot. Like, and then just trying, and then I try to hang out and get to know like the Brazilians' perspective on footballers.
yeah,
We're huge into futsal. There's a lot of futsal clubs in Eastern. Massachusetts near Boston because there's a lot of Brazilians there. So we've done work with like Flair. We've done work with Gold Star, which is like a local futsal club, and like love just like their philosophy of like, hey, more touches, more,
Yeah.
the benefits of this at a young age. And so we're trying to. There's a lot of issues with American soccer, and we're trying to, as a board member and the great team that we have at our club, like just trying to fix those things and be open-minded, because it's like
Yeah.
we're so there's so many, and especially even with coaches, right? Like one thing I love that you talked about on that podcast, not to hold you up more, but it just
Yeah. Let's keep going.
this idea of like, there's you just drop off your kid, you don't ask any questions, the parents aren't involved, we don't want to hear your
Yeah.
we don't we recently I put together a survey to give out to parents, and I'm like, more data more better, right? It's only better if we get more data and feedback, and we know, see what they like don't like. Doesn't mean that you're going to act on everything that you read, but
Yeah.
it just, like I said, it's more data. So like we might eventually make a decision that data will be a part of that discussion, and then might help us make that decision. And of course, we get some feedback from coaches that are like, they didn't like the idea, and there were, and it's just like, to me, it's like we don't have to run it like a dictatorship. Like we should be
Yeah.
open-minded and open to new. And I've always been like that with everything I do, where I'm like, okay, like I love sports philosophy. Like you brought up Doc Rivers. I love Doc Rivers. I love hearing like his outlook on sports, what motivated him, the way, what he thought was important. He's very much he wasn't the best X and O's coach, but he was one of the best at motivating players and
Yeah.
getting the most out of them. And so it's like, to me, that's all important. But the problem with coaches, and I say this all the time, like as a player, you didn't have the game all figured out. As a coach, that remains the same. Like, but it's almost like as a coach, you are in a role of being a leader of men, right? So you have to coach with confidence. You have to convince the parents, the players to buy in. And I think a little of that sometimes can create a bit of a, I don't know, like you almost start believing your own hype, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. And it's a difficult environment to be a vulnerable leader. I've become really interested in vulnerability and leadership and Brene Brown stuff. And I see it a lot in football clubs where whatever you're thinking, you have to put a mask on and show that you're in control and that you know what you're doing. Amarim is a good example at the moment. Any sign of weakness there, and you lose confidence. So you've got to get to a point where you are in a powerful enough position to be open about, I got that one wrong. There are certain coaches who would be able to come out and on a slot if he came out on the weekend and said, tactically got that wrong. We got away with one. We beat West Ham just. He'd get away with it because the top of the league. if Amarin came out and said exactly the same thing, even in the same context, perhaps where they just won a game, that would be, yeah, that'd be a problem. So I think vulnerability in leadership in sport is a really, really interesting topic. I'd love to speak to coaches about that, and I do some work with clubs where I encourage the coaches to come on this journey with the parents, with the players, and it's really good for being independent in that regard. So I can stand in a room saying, this doesn't matter to me what you say here. I'm not going to make a judgment about your commitment to the club because I'm completely independent. I'm just going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to make sense of this data. And through that, the work that I do with clubs is around collaborative culture. How do we get players, parents, coaches walking in each other's shoes so that a parent knows what it's like to be a coach and doesn't just kick off because they think that their son's the most important thing? They actually realize that, that coach, they're a human being and they're under the same stress as me and you. And I get the coach in a room and say, how, if you were parents, and some of them are, how would you want a coach to behave? And then I get the parents in the room and say, you're not parents tonight, you're coaches. So if you were a coach, how would you want a parent to behave? And then you get the kids in the room and say, kids, how do you want coaches and parents to behave on the pitch? And then all that data comes into a pot, and we're able to co-collaborate on or co-construct standards of how we all and then it's not the dictatorship you referred to is really interesting, because most of the clubs that I come across, they'll go, right, let's get all the parents in. We're having a parents meeting, and the first thing they'll do is, here are the rules for our club. And the parents get a pen out and go, right, best write those ones down. And I'm thinking that you're not going to get any buy-in, because you're just telling them that these are the rules. And by the way, then the coaches sometimes struggle to keep up with those, like, no phones. And then the coach will be on the phone. Or so actually, phones is a really good example. You can have a fantastic conversation with kids and parents about phones and co-construct some standards around phones, because team selection will be done via WhatsApp groups. So they need phones in there, but they also all agree that those things are a real distraction for kids' attention. So, all right, let's co-construct. How are we going to get over this then? How are we going to model behavior to our kids and actually probably do something good for ourselves by releasing ourselves from the phone a little bit? What a positive spin on what we see as a problem. And I always go back to the Venn diagram, the crossover circles that you mentioned, because it explains so much. A collaborative culture occurs when the coaches and the parents and the players all have that crossover, not when we've got a circle over here and a circle over here, and they don't meet. And the coaches see the parents as a problem, the parents see the coaches as a problem. So instead of anybody dealing with it, they just stay separate and they just never talk. And then we get mistrust. Then we get rumor about how other people are. And, oh, I heard this coach said this, and yeah, then you're in a world of pain. So yeah, I mean, if that's something that goes on with your club, let me know. We can have a chat. We can do it virtually or whatever. But and it's interesting how you can actually then turn your parents into a resource for your club. Very, very interesting. They've got loads of skills, loads of enthusiasm, and they want you to do well because that's good for them and their kids. So I think sometimes parents are a bit of a underused resource for clubs, and because they're just seen as a problem.